Suspend your disbelief, your rational, analytic mind, just for a minute, just for the length of this podcast. What if all I am about to tell you is the truth? What if the information you will be provided is from a divine source? Just for this time, I am your Axis Mundi. Consider this podcast your channel, your second opinion. When I do a reading, something larger than myself is working through me. So ask what you wish. This is your channel, your doorway to the divine. Welcome to you from throughout the world, from wherever you are receiving this podcast. Some of the places I'm reaching are Russia, Germany, Canada, Poland, and in the United States, California, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Minnesota, Illinois, Missouri, Mississippi, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Yeah, I'm doing that a little different. I just want to get through that intro a little quicker and get on with it. Get on with the show. Today I'm going to have a little interview with a fellow named Chris. He's going to talk to us about symbolism. And Velikovsky, and he provided me a little education on myself. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the protests this week. I attended a protest. I did a little video earlier in the week. I'm also doing a once a week audio only podcast, and I usually put that out on Tuesday morning at this point. And I'm really quite happy with how that is going. I'm getting pretty good reach on that. That's why I'm getting all those states, and why my intro is so much shorter. This interview with Chris goes to show you. Here at John Sterl, I'll interview just about anybody. If you got something you would like to talk about, or a message you would like to get out, send me an email over to John at johnsterl.net, and we will set up an interview for you. If you would like a private reading, send me an email to the same place, and we will set up a private reading for you. So it was a busy, interesting week, and I've got some things I want to talk about in regards to the protest, and then but first we're going to do the interview. So I'm going to move right over to that, and I hope you enjoy that. Welcome to John's Tarot, and today on John's Tarot, I'm going to bring you Chris of Gray Glove is the name of his podcast. Chris has an interest in symbolism and how it overlaps into tarot. And Chris knows about archetypes and Velikovsky. I'll get him to talk a little bit about that. Maybe I'll get him to throw in a little Carl Jung. Hi, Chris. How you doing today?
Hey, thank you for the kind intro, John. Yeah, I've only barely scratched the surface with Jung, but Velikovsky is definitely an interest of mine for those of you familiar with it.
Well, why don't we start there? But why don't you give me a little education on Velikovsky?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the documentaries that I came across just on random autoplay years ago is called "Symbols of an Alien Sky." And it really dove into all the archetypal symbols, and just in the shortest summary of it, it's suggesting that there was planetary shifts that happened in the past that caused cataclysms. A lot of esoteric symbolism is around the planets and the gods. So their bit is that some kind of planet crashed into the solar system recently. Some people have suggested comets. I'm more onto the comet train there. I have a little bit of formal education in geology, so I've kind of followed what I can observe there, but all of the old myths and legends of cataclysm, there's growing evidence of that. Those of you familiar with the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis that happened at the end of the Ice Age, which is exactly when Plato said Atlantis sank. So all the ancient mysteries are all kind of interconnected from that context. In Velikovsky, he was some genius, and he combined psychiatry with cataclysm. One of the more interesting bits, which probably has the largest overlap with tarot, is he says that a lot of the strangeness of modern religion, or why it doesn't make sense, is that there was a collective trauma sort of encapsulated in the old myths, where after the planet, the stars aligned and the stars fell, that there was just trauma, and trying to cope with that trauma is where a lot of religion comes from. I forget the exact words he did. I probably didn't do it justice what he was calling it. I think trauma repression maybe is where he was going with that. So that's kind of Velikovsky. He made these like crazy predictions that came true of like the temperature of Venus, or quite a few other ones. But yeah, speaking of that, like the science there, it is odd. Like Venus is warmer than it should be. It's also spinning the wrong direction. So like people speculate, did Venus recently crash into the solar system? It's a really interesting hypothesis. But yeah, have you heard any of that before?
I've heard a little bit of it, but coming from Graham Hancock, you've heard of him,
Yes. Yep.
and
I like
and he
Hancock as well. So
and he'll talk about how there was civilizations, a civilization here on this planet prior to the Younger Dryas, and that pieces of our myth have exist to this day through our mythology, and that's a little bit about what we're talking about, is it? Is it not?
yes, it's yeah, Velikovsky was a little bit before Hancock. He was
Yeah.
villainized a bit more. I mean, some of his theories are, I mean, he didn't have the internet back then, but he did a really impressive job. And certainly some of his scientific predictions were like just obscene. Like one of the things he thought is that like oil would like drip from comets or something. I forget what it was. But other people have talked about that there's plagues that might follow in the tail of a comet or something like that. It's a really interesting theory. I forget off the top of my head what the famous comets are.
There's
But yeah,
Halley's.
yeah, and one of Hancock's friends, Randall Carlson, I watched a few hundred hours of his lectures. I've just barely scratched the surface. Yeah, and I think what he's told Graham, a lot of it is like the radiant point of the Taurid meteor stream, I believe, is the Pleiades, which is why there's so much ancient symbolism around the Pleiades in 7. So that's that bit. Like when you look up at the sky, you can just follow like Orion's belt to Taurus, right? And then you see the Pleiades off there. Yeah, I don't know if maybe just like trying to understand the past is kind of tricky. I'm very interested in ancient history myself. Like one example, just to add context to like trying to figure out where these symbols come from. I know in Egypt there's a lot of like animal hybrids, which can be kind of confusing. But one of the most interesting perspectives I picked up one time was that like primitive people misunderstood a man on a horse as a centaur. So they like combine the symbol, so it would be like the body is on the horse. Have you ever heard of that before?
Not that particular one. I have heard of the one where uh, archaeoastrology. We were talking about the belt of Orion
Mm-hmm.
and how those things line up on Christmas Day for the winter solstice, where that's going to be the darkest day of the year. And they talk about, and then the sun rises right around Christmas Day, when we come out of the winter solstice, and
Yes.
that imagery has been co-opted by Christianity, and the symbolism they use is, the Son of God, or in other words, the sun god, and
Yeah.
the sun is gonna have more appearance. It's gonna be the end of the darkness.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the Zeitgeist documentary is probably the most famous one that spread that idea. I even recently I came across I don't know, one of those kind of Masonic random videos you see on YouTube all the time. But one of them was saying a lot of the monuments they do mark, well, certainly for farming. This is like trying to understand the history of symbols. So like to know when to plant the crops, they needed to know like the summer solstice, and they would aim the monuments to mark like when spring started and like when fall began, and or like the lowest point in the sky, so that they know when to plant their crops. I'm forgetting off the top of my head the symbolism they found, but quite a few different sources, other Masonic sources I've looked into, they talk about a megalithic yard. So there's like measurement systems that are lingering from the past. And you see those expressed in the monuments all around the world, which kind of leads to the next bit. I mean, sometimes people get, people get carried away with the Atlantis stuff, but I mean, I think it's interesting. People have suggested all kinds of locations for it, whether it's southern Spain or in the Atlas Mountains or just south of the Atlas Mountains. Like the Eye in the Sahara is the latest craze, even though it's not an island. And then people have suggested the Azores, which is in the middle of the Atlantic. Me personally, in my research, I came across Andrew Collins. He thinks it's in the Caribbean, and I've dug into that more. For me, I see the Bahamas as the best location. And as Graham Hancock also pointed out, that like America is Atlantis. It's the continent on the other side of the ocean.
What do you think about the possibility of there being a civilization in what is now the South Pole region? They're making discoveries of pollens and palm trees and everything, buried miles beneath the ice. But that was at one time.
Yeah, I've heard some of that, but I've looked into it a bit, and I can't find anything too conclusive. I think it's interesting. Certainly, if there were like comet impacts or something, it can cause very localized damage and cooling. But I don't really see a need to pull the Antarctica card, because there's overwhelming evidence of transatlantic contact for way before Columbus. As the saying goes, I think Columbus was the last person to discover America. Definitely was not the first. Just another tangent there. One of the other books, Uriel's Machine, by Christopher Knight. He mentioned there's a Catholic cathedral, I think, in Scotland. It has like corn carvings on it from before Columbus. So that would be impossible if Columbus was the first person to sail to the New World.
They believe that certainly the Vikings were here before Columbus, the Norsemen, and there's some discussion about the I want to say the Phoenicians who
Yes.
that were here up in Michigan mining copper long before Columbus.
Yep, and I'm totally following the Phoenician there. I'm all in on that one myself, because there's growing evidence of that in particular. But just trying to stick to the more archetypal. So the myth says that there was a pillar of, I believe, marble and stone to survive either flooding or fire. But kind of the interesting bit there, I think it's Spain, one of their coat of arms, it says nothing lies beyond, and they have the dual pillars that you see in quite a few different religions and groups. But some of that is it's some kind of deception. Well, on one hand, it's like, well, don't keep sailing past the Mediterranean because there is nothing there for a few days. But it is sort of a deception that there is no other continent if you just keep sailing. But some of that is all intertwined in these kind of duality of these two pillars, and the cycles of cataclysm. That's kind of where I'm going at, and the cycles of planting, the cycles of the season. These things, these kind of archetypes, they kind of keep repeating quite a bit. Another one. Trying to just jump around large symbolism. So
How about the pyramids?
Right. So I would probably stick to the Sphinx because the pyramids, I really don't know. I've heard things like floating the blocks with water somehow, but um,
Do you think they predate the actual Egyptians and possibly the Sphinx too? Predate the Egyptian society?
no, I've heard all those, but I forget the source if it's Hancock or as it was the guy something I forget his predecessor, but they just going off of the astrology, so like the zodiacs. So like one of the other things Randall Carlson talks about is that when we go into the age of Leo, there it may be like a destructive time, like maybe there's more comets, or even just if you go like the uh, Death Star route, that maybe we cross paths with another solar system every 20,000 years or something. But Leo in particular, and I think that ties back to the Sphinx having a lion's head. Um, but you can date that either like 10,000 or like 20,000 years ago. I haven't looked into those theories in a while, but um,
Have you looked into the theories? I can't remember this guy's name either. He about the ancient Mesopotamians, and they talked about star people, and they talked about
they're
oh
messengers from the stars, and I think
yeah.
that's it's a common kind of that's definitely an archetype as well.
How about anything from Globeki Tepe,
Yeah, I don't think we
which
have
comes
time.
to us from right after the Younger Dryas?
Yeah, like it might be a monument to that cataclysm. Certainly the when you're talking about the star people like the Anunnaki, it it is the Phoenicians. A lot of the people like in I don't know, like Lebanon and even some people in Gaza. I mean, some of them do have like kind of more bird-like features, which might suggest some kind of connection to the Anunnaki or the people in the Dead Sea kind of area. Um, Certainly, there are quite a few monuments around the world that have uh, non-Native American looking features, and I find that theory very interesting. If you just go off of the facial profile, there are some other people. There's a guy. His name's like Rowan Miller or something. He's like another symbols guy. He's like can look at the Mayan glyphs and like decode that. I'm not nearly smart enough to do that, but he's got quite a bit of stuff on the facial profile of the statues that it doesn't match the local race of people. Um, but
Isn't there some tribes down in South America that they have the Olmecs, and that there are carvings of we're going to Africanized people
yeah, the
in
Egyptians went over there as well, and that would be proof of that too. The Olmecs. So multiple waves of people have been over there. Um,
So tell me, let's talk a little bit about tarot for a few minutes. How do you see this? How do you see the ancient symbolism bleeding into modern tarot?
Yeah, well, I guess to quote Velikovsky, so like after the like cataclysms, so the sky goes dark, and then a new world is born, sort of from the debris falling, and there's quite a few myths about like the cosmic tree, that there's a fruit that falls off the cosmic tree, and then we're kind of reborn from that. So there's like renewal symbolism and duality, like encoded in all of that. I listened to a guy, Michael Tazarian, years ago. He was on
Sure.
about the tree symbolism, which I picked up a little bit from that, but I've like run with it quite a bit myself. Or what's interesting there, so like in the duality of the pillars of Atlantis or something, there is one theory about vitamin C as being like the mystery between like the fifth element, or it's like what keeps people alive when they're sailing. So like if you cut open a lemon or certain fruits, they have certain patterns like five pointed, um, is it 6 pointed or 8 pointed shapes or stars. And you see those in quite a bit of the tarot symbolism, like Venus. And also, like, keeping track of time between cataclysms is another archetype. So Venus is a clock in the sky. The ancients tracked it, and if the pentagram is Venus, it's all over tarot decks. There's also the morning star, the evening star. And also, a really far out there idea is that some of the discrepancy between what is the morning star, whether you're in Egypt or in the Middle East, if it's Venus or the sun, what constitutes the morning star, that adds a lot to the confusion around the ancient mysteries. I'm still digging into that myself, but it's one of those things that really stood out to me in particular in my research, is the interchangeability of duality between like eclipses of the sun and the moon, and also the duality of Venus in particular. That they do seem to be used interchangeably even in modern symbolism. Whether you're watching movies or music videos, you see the same symbols from the tarot cards everywhere. And you actually see tarot cards in music videos quite a bit too.
Are they using ancient symbolism to sell modern products? I mean, I wouldn't put it past the
Yes.
commercialization of our society.
Yeah, that's where I get into. Sometimes these symbols are abused to either sell things or to entrap people, etc. But I think a lot of that gets tied into like the fifth element is, or like the third eye, that these duality and rebirth symbols are all used interchangeably from what I can look at. I'm working on a way to classify them sort of systematically, but it's going to take me forever to do that. But vitamin C being one of the mystery ones, or like another interesting bit is like radioactivity. With the atomic age, it was sort of like, it's sort of like the new kind of mysterious fifth element in the esoteric sense. But another kind of symbolism, just to jump around. So like, let's say to bring in Christianity, or like the mystery of the Trinity. So if you think about between like the pillars of Atlantis, or I think you even see the pillars of Atlantis behind the Hebrew symbols as well, with Judaism as well, or the masculine triangle that's upward, or the downward triangle that's feminine, and that's between the two pillars in a lot of their symbolism. Or you go to Christianity, that from what I think and what I've looked at, is like the right pillar appears to represent, it's the masculine, and it represents the sort of wholesome or complete or unity with God. And then the left pillar kind of represents the feminine, or the moon. So right pillar sun, left pillar moon. And some of that just ties back to the people planting the crops with the duality of the seasons. But I guess another kind of theme that's, this might be getting too advanced. Maybe your audience is advanced, but I think it's in Gnostic belief. You've got like, you start out whole, and then you fall into the material world, down into like the feminine. And so you have that same ritual by the breaking of the bread, that you have like a whole piece of bread, and then you take a piece of the bread, and in the Christian, I've been reading, like I read alternative sources. I also will read like Martin Luther. So like the idea with Christianity is from the sacrament that a bunch of individual people, just like the individual grains of the bread, they get like baked together, and then they break it. So it's like going from the right pillar of Atlantis to the left pillar of Atlantis, back to the center of Atlantis. And that's kind of the idea of like 1, 2, 3. People call it problem, reaction, solution in certain circles. But it's all a very similar kind of belief in the, I'm trying to think in terms of tarot. Like when you think of a fall into the material world or into the moon. How does that speak to you with the moon? I mean, just even the high priestess card, you see the two pillars.
Well, there is the moon card, and then when I see the two pillars, I often think about the pillars of Solomon from
Yes. Yep.
the pillars of Solomon from the Bible, but also there is the Kabbalic reference where on the tree of life, one pillar is severity, the other is mercy, and we're trying to find a place in the middle. If you ever looked at the tree of life from the
Yes.
Kabbalah,
Yeah, and
I,
we're just
I
go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
I see a lot of I see a lot of that type of symbolism when I look at the two pillars, either on the Hierophant or the High Priestess, judgment, the Judgment card. You'll see the pillars, and I believe that's referring to those two things.
Yeah, and a lot of it with tarot is finding your balance or your center kind of person, and that's why I keep trying to loop back to the idea of you go from the right pillar to the left pillar to your center. And I think some people say that like finding the godhood or connecting to God or whatever balance kind of opens up your third eye. Like these archetypes are used interchangeably from what I've been trying to find. I'm personally trying to find the more universal bits there. One kind of interesting tangent that I came across to bring in more astrology. Someone was explaining to me that some of these Gnostic beliefs are somehow encoded in the candles on the Jewish menorah or something like that. That there's like Saturn and the moon involved there. But then someone was explaining to me. Well, I was joking that in a way Jesus inverted a lot of archetypes in Judaism, and then someone else was saying in a conversation I had that the Arabs, that the Muslims, they take the order of the planets that the Jews have, and they flip it, so it's the opposite on purpose. So they just took it and flipped it, in the kind of occult kind of way. So to explain that in a way, because I'm sure a lot of people don't know what I just said, but the ancients used to think the planet was flat, or the world was, the solar system was flat. So when you think about the Earth at the center, and then it'd be like the moon would be right above kind of your reality. And then further and farther away from you could observe would be like Saturn is the entrance into our solar system. Or like when you fall, like I said, when you fall from the right pillar of Atlantis down into the planet, you fall through the moon or something like that. That those are the sort of archetypal understandings of what people could see with their eyes, and kind of how that ties into kind of the archetypes. And then the zodiacs that are all happening in that background would be like the Wheel of Fortune, I believe, is the
Oh,
zodiacs.
there is so much symbolism in
Yeah.
the Wheel of Fortune. If you look at that one, and the letters that go around the wheel, uh, rota means in Latin means wheel, and then there's which means tarot, and then there's a orta means to cultivate or grow, and there's an O which means to orate or speak, and then there's another T which means the law or Torah, and then Ator, another word for the Egyptian god of Hathor, a goddess of love, and the wheel spells, if you were take it and put it into a language, it says the wheel of tarot brings order by telling us the law of love, telling us the law of Hathor. So you have to take a look at the Wheel of Fortune sometime, and I've looked at that one and went, how do they put all that information in there?
It's a pretty dense card, and there's another lecture by Randall Carlson on that it's very interesting as well. I saw it like, I don't know, 8 years ago, so I can't remember it. But his channel's Geocosmic Rex. He's got some tarot analysis. That's what got me interested in tarot initially. I before I studied Randall Carlson, I was really skeptical. I was a little less informed about different religions and cultures at that time. But growing up and expanding my horizons, I went, oh, that's interesting. So this Kabbalah and Masonic stuff, there's actually something to it. There are astrological events that happened, and a lot of that is recorded in the geological record. So that is where my studies have branched from. So another way of saying that would be how to predict comet impacts over 20,000 years, that these symbols contain science in them if you look hard enough. Like another example is I came across this really eccentric channel. I forget the name of it. It was like God Electric or something, where this guy was a physicist, and he was taking like the Egyptian symbols and putting them into like physics diagrams. It's like the most amazing thing I've ever seen. But some of that is one way to take it is that there are like atmospheric weapon blueprints, like just sitting on the walls in Egypt, where it's describing how the atmosphere interacts with like very high energy, whether it be like a comet or like a nearby planet passing by. So that stuff is where I started out, just coming from that. We're like, oh, this is interesting. So there's physics in these cards and these symbols and potentially weapons. Now, some people believe the Egyptians had like atmospheric weapons and UFOs and stuff, which I don't, but I believe they witnessed things in the sky that like how to do it, interplanetary discharge. That's one of the other things Velikovsky is interested in. So like if you saw a giant lightning arc between like Venus and our planet, that might be something you would write down. So coming from that is where I started with my introduction to symbolism. And I've arrived at trying to learn more about tarot.
Do you think
That makes
that
sense.
some of the symbolism encoded in the tarot or encoded in some of our iconastic religious pictures records that time right before the Younger Dryas, where there was a major cataclysm?
Yeah, it's hard to prove, like, but definitely the fragments of it. So the way I call it, or I guess Jung calls it like collective unconscious and stuff like that. But for me, I see things as like fragments of the pre-flood world, with Atlantis myth being one of those fragments of pre-flood, meaning pre-Younger Dryas. And also, I alluded to the Taurid meteor stream. So it's very likely that the comet that created the Taurid meteor stream is what caused the Younger Dryas. So the fact that the Solon, was able to tell the Greeks about Atlantis and the dates, it is very interesting that they got the date right. Now, there is a 1,200-year gap from the beginning of the Younger Dryas to the end of the Younger Dryas, which Graham Hancock he never explains that gap. He always just vaguely says that civilization was wiped out at the end of the Ice Age and we had to restart. But there was a 1,200-year period between the date we were given and when the comet hit. So there was a melting event at the end of that 1,200-year period, which coincides with the melting of the ice caps and the date that we were given for Atlantis. But yeah, so the card that I can't remember, but trying to think what is the name of that. But Randall Carlson was talking about like the Great Year. Are you familiar with that term? I don't know if it's a
I've
Masonic
heard
term
it
or
before,
not.
but I'm not familiar with what it means.
I think it's just a complete trip around the zodiac. So like I mentioned,
Oh yeah. I know what that is. That's the rotation of the zodiac. So it's like a 12,000 year
yeah,
rotation from the wobble of the Earth,
yeah,
where our view of our view of the zodiac changes during that period of time.
yeah. I believe it's where the sun rises in the sky, like the backdrop. So a lot of the symbolism and why the myths change a lot and it's hard to trace them is because the planet's constantly moving. So the sun's always rising and from a different spot. I think most people are probably familiar with Aries being Judaism, Pisces being Christianity. And I mean, I believe we're headed into the age of Aquarius, which I believe is the opposite side of Leo in the zodiac wheel, that lecture I was referring to.
Do you think, question, and we're going to start
Yeah.
to wrap this up, question, do you think modern human beings as we know us today, existed before the Younger Dryas with Ice Age animals?
Yeah, I think that something like Renaissance technology existed at 12,000 years ago, and it was lost, and then it was suppressed by the church while they were trying to steal all that technology in fragments. I think that's why we seem to progress into the Industrial Revolution so quickly, because the knowledge was all kept secret until it became profitable to enslave, people in factories. But yeah, I guess another few quick hits on tarot cards just to wrap up. So like the Magician, like the infinity sign.
Yes.
Yeah, and even the sort of triad symbol you see all across the world, the tri sort of swastika looking thing. It's like the sun. It puts a shadow on a stick throughout the year, and it creates three kind of swirls. You see them all over monuments all over the world. I believe the Sicilians are the ones with the claim to that symbol. The most famous one. Or you think of a figure eight. The figure eight is the symbol that the sun makes as it travels through the sky every day, if you just look where the sun
Oh, yeah,
is.
it does. That's true.
So there's a masculine and feminine duality there. I always thought it was just a masculine symbol if it was the sun, but it actually turns out that the left side of the loop is feminine and the right side is masculine. The Magician cards, he's holding up a hand up, which would probably be masculine, and then down would mean feminine in the material world. See the pentagram on the table, that would be Venus, or I think with a circle, it becomes Earth. I forget, is it the top of the chalice is feminine, and then the base of it, the shaft, is masculine. So then the table has three pegs or something, right? So that
Yeah,
would
no,
be the
table only
mystery
has
of
three
three.
legs. Yeah.
That would just be the Holy Trinity. It's the same story. And then the pillars on the High Priestess card would be the same symbolism. So it would be the moon and the sun have a 33-year cycle. I think Jesus was 33 years old too. So the sinking of time after cataclysms and between the moon calendar and the sun calendar. It's just astrology again, from what I've studied. There's duality between that. Try to find another good one.
It's interesting the way that ancient astrology is maintained, things that the Egyptians discovered, that the myths, the iconology, the symbolism, and it's been carried forward in Christianity for thousands of years. But people don't question it. They don't look beyond. They don't look beyond the face value of it. They
Well,
don't
I
look
do.
any deeper
So,
into it. Mhm.
yeah, like the death card. So it's the downward pentagram is supposed to mean death, and the upward pentagram is life or something. Also think people probably assume that to be the resurrection of Jesus. It's the only thing that could explain why the symbol's so popular in America. I don't think there's a bunch of people worshiping Venus with a upward
No,
five-pointed star.
no, not a whole. Well, there are some, but not a whole lot. It's not one of the major religions. I tend to be more of a Gnostic myself, or would you say I'm an independent?
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I would just run with that as, like I mentioned, the discrepancy of the morning star, whether it's Venus, the rising of Venus, or whether it's the sun. I forget in Egypt at the summer solstice. I forget they call that the morning star. Um,
Oh yeah,
that that
Venus lines up with the belt of what, well, we just talked about it. The belt of, oh, I can't remember. Uh, on the solstices, the belt of Orion. Yeah.
yeah,
Anyway,
I forget all that astrology there. It's so hard to like learn it all. Like I'm trying to get as general of
It's
an
it.
archetype from things as I can.
It's an interesting study. Hey, Chris, I want to thank you for coming on John's Tarot today. If somebody wants to listen to your podcast, where would they find it at?
Yeah, if you search the Gray Glove podcast on Odyssey, and I'll give you a link that you can put in the notes. But yeah, my channel is I'm a clan leader in a video game called Clash of Clans, and my clan name is Axes of Evil. So there's clan stuff mixed in my channel. But my podcast I'm making is called the Gray Glove Podcast. And I guess one thing is, if you want to have full access to my podcast, you have to talk to me first on a podcast. So I only put little trailers out because I'm not looking for listeners. I'm looking for people who want to build on their own and sort of take things into their own hands. So everyone's welcome. If you want to come over and kind of learn, we've barely touched on the surface of where symbols overlap with tarot.
Yeah, yeah. I want to thank you for coming out and joining me today and taking time out of your busy day in order to give me a little time and give my listeners a little time. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Yes, thank you, John. This was fun. And some other time we'll have to catch up again. So,
All righty. Now hang in there for a minute. Well, that was Chris from Gray Gloves Podcast, and I will put up some links for him so you can get a hold of him and see what Chris has got to say. This is a little video of I attended the No Kings protest. Okay, so it wasn't it was fun, and I did a little video on it on that day, and that's up on my YouTube site. So if you want to take a look at the what I had to say on that day, that's okay. I felt good about doing it. I actually got very emotional. I was so surprised. I thought I was going to interview some people, but I was so emotional. I was choked up. I couldn't do it, and I'm expressing how I feel. It gave me an outlet. It was very cathartic, and I expressed how I feel. And I put it up there on YouTube, and a lot of people were like over 50 years old. We had Mima and Papa there protesting. You could see how big it was, all lined up down the street. At that particular corner, there had been a previous protest, and there was maybe 200-300 people at this previous protest, but on that day there was like thousands. So there is some unrest in this country, and like I said, Mima and Papa. See, look at the people in the background. They're all older Americans, and these are the people who may be protesting him who shall not be named. And is he going to send out the Marines against Mima and Papa? you know, we will see. And it was peaceful. We weren't even getting out. Nobody was even getting out into the streets or impeding traffic. And I guess I have some people who are really mad at me about attending this protest. But at my age, you got to do what you feel is the right thing to do. And like I said, I posted it up on my YouTube channel, and I got some very, we'll say, disturbing comments from MAGA. The stuff that they say. Well, what am I going to do? I must have hit a nerve, or they wouldn't be so upset. You can go out there and take a look at it on John's Tarot on YouTube. That's just how I felt. And in my description of my feelings, I in no way disparaged anybody or put anybody down. I just expressed my experience and my feelings, and they cannot tolerate that for some reason. And I think that's the things I was going to do my tarot readings on today. Let me move over to my tarot cam. My ability to read tarot is a gift, an expression of divine love, and I'm here to share it with you in that same spirit. So my first question will be, did the No King's Day parade, will that have any effect, or what effect will that have? I'm going to go ahead and shuffle the deck. The No King's Day protest. What effect will that have? And we're just going to do 3 cards. The No King's Day protest. What effect will that have? That first card is the Ace of Swords. That's a good card. The second card is the Tower. Uh-oh. And then the third card is I call it the Apprentice. And that is sometimes my card for Trump. He's the Apprentice. Remember he had that he had that television show, The Apprentice? Let's throw some maroons on this. And it's quite obvious what the cards are saying. You don't need a psychic for this one. Odin, free up, guide us reading. For the Ace of Swords, the Tower, and the 8 of Pentacles. What effect will the protest, No King's Day protest, have? Because, like I said, I felt good about it. It was cathartic for me. But will it have any kind of effect? Iwaz is my first rune. There we go. Like that. Suitable. It has to do with delay. And then the Tower. And that one is called Canal. Has to do with shining light. Shining light on an issue. And then the third, and then the third rune is Ophelia. So it's kind of easy to interpret that one. The Ace of Swords has to do with truth, legal victories. You see the crown with the wreaths on it, and the sword always has to do with truth and winning. So the truth is going to have that people are expressing the truth and the truth of how they feel. And it was a victory for many people. And right now we are in a period of waiting. The rune is Iwaz, and that has to do with delay, transformations. Wait on the will of the higher power. And so everybody got out there and expressed themselves, and now we're in a period of waiting. And then I'm asking about the effect that will have. And now we got the Tower. The Tower and the 8 of Pentacles. The Tower has to do with collapse. All methods of government, not methods of government, it's not what I want to say, but your, maybe that is what I want to say, but that's not what I want to express. Old methods of doing things are not going to work anymore. They are collapsing. And in regards to this, the support for he who shall not be named is starting to collapse. You like it when I use that term, he who shall not be named. Support for he who shall not be named is starting to collapse. And then the rune Canaz has to do with shining the light on some of the problems that are going on with this administration. And then, what is going to collapse? Who is going to collapse? Of course, it's the Apprentice, the 8 of Pentacles. And that is always my card for he who shall not be named. Support for him is starting to collapse. Certain things that the rune the rune is Orthelia. Certain things are going to have to be stripped away so that we can come into inheritance. The inheritance is a democratic republic. I'm not happy with the way things are going there, but that is our inheritance. That's the inheritance we want to pass on to the next generations. It hasn't been a perfect situation. We've had our problems, but an autocratic form of government, and I'm not going to use all the harsh words, is not what we want to pass on to our progeny. We want to pass on something that's workable, that they can sort out their differences, and hopefully we can sort out ours. So what's going to the effect They shine the light of truth on the situation. There's a bit of a pause right now, as we wait on the will of the higher power. But we can expect some collapse with the apprentice as we shine the light on what's going on in our, and then we try to provide a positive inheritance for those in the future generations. That's what we really want to do. So let me do another question. Let me gather the cards. And if you have gather the cards. If you have certain questions that you would like to submit your questions. If you have a certain topics that you would like to talk about, submit your topic. Send me a note over to john@johnstarot.net, and we'll go ahead and do that. This question has to do more about me, or more about you too. If you are in a position where you are, like I posted my feelings about the No King's Day protest, and I got some real negative feedback from MAGAs. And really their stuff is quite vulgar and juvenile, and it's they're trying to hurt me. I'm an older man. I am a disabled veteran. I'm a married disabled veteran, and these are the guys that are going to want a dog pile, right? I'm really impressed by you guys. So, what is the proper way to react to MAGA name calling? Now, if you have ever gone onto an online forum and expressed your feelings, you may have experienced this. They always do this. They'll dogpile you, and they'll do name calling. And I'm like, is this supposed to make me want to join their movement? Is this supposed to stifle my stifle my free speech? What is their goal, I wonder? It's really kind of confusing to me. I think this has to do with their fear. It has to do with their fear, especially when you hit a nerve. So they have to respond in some way. But what I want to know is, what is the proper response to MAGA name calling, whether it be online or in person? And let's go ahead and shuffle the cards. What is the proper response to MAGA name calling? What is the proper response to MAGA name calling? And our first card is the Three of Wands. My second card is the Six of Cups. And my third card is, there's my answer, the Five of Swords. And I'll throw some runes on it. Where my runes go? For the Three of Wands, Six of Cups, and the Five of Swords, what is the proper response to MAGA name calling? And this rune comes up, and this one is Iwas, has to do with a delay. My second rune for the Six of Cups. Oh, Bayu. And that one has to do with movable wealth. And then the third rune for the Five of Swords. I know exactly what that one is saying. And again, Canal. Canal. There we go. So it's suggesting patience. The tarot is suggesting patience and waiting. Some certain things have been put in, or certain decisions have been made that have been put into movement, and we're waiting for the response for these things that we have. The world is full of cause and effect. So we made a cause. There's going to be an effect. We're waiting for that effect. We're standing there waiting. And then the rune of Canals, waiting on the will of the higher power. During this period of waiting, is not a time to do nothing. It's a time to think out your strategy, think out your plan, think out the possible effects of the movements that you set in order. The Six of Cups has to do with childhood, childhood friends, childhood memories, childlike responses. And as I said, they were kind of somewhat infantile, somewhat juvenile, in their responses. And the rune has to do with Feiyu, has to do with movable wealth, and I think I have to think about that one as it relates to this movable wealth. I think that is, well, long as is what you hold inside of you, and and you take with you no matter where you go. It's not about coins. It's not about financial wealth, and it's about inside of you, your sense of purpose, your sense of what's right, your sense of what's wrong, and that is your wealth, your integrity. As a nurse, I know that the most important thing I have in my life is my integrity. So that when I say something is happening and I report something that's happened, that's what's happened. And but your integrity is the most important thing that you have to take with you to move forward. And then the five of wands, the five of swords. You see a man there with a green tunic and the swords on his shoulder. People in the background walking away, and this has to do with we may not be happy with the way people in our environment are behaving themselves, and we may not be in agreement with them. But we need to have a thick skin. We have the green tunic. You have to have a thick skin and hold your swords of truth close to you. And it's time, but it's also saying, don't needlessly engage these people, because you're not going to win. They're not gonna come around. They are fully entrenched in their way of thinking. Don't needlessly engage them. And maybe I need to consider that. Wasn't my intention to needlessly engage them. As canals, as we shine the light of truth on the situation, it's going to start to change and get better. Well, I've run this quite long enough. I'm going to head and sign off for this week.
Goodbye, Professor Marvel, and thanks a lot.
It's my pleasure. Go ahead and contact me for anything that you have going on. It's on your mind. I will be on Tuesdays when I do a podcast-only version, and it's on all the popular podcast sites. It's also on my website at johnstarot.net if you like that. So until next week, be careful, be cool, and be kind. And I'll see you all again next week. All right. Oh, yes. Have courage. Find faith. All right. Be the best you can be. I'll talk to you all next week.